So the process of how this works, according to my personal experience, how to fully awaken Kundalini, or the brass serpent. Bear with me. Just take a second. It starts with a baptism by water. The Hindus have the Ganges, baptism by water, uh, which is like a contract between the earth and them. I don't know if that's what induces the Hindu experience, but for me it was a baptism between two people. I was baptized in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost, which I fully believe would have worked just as well had it been Horus, Isis, and Osiris, uh, trinities of light. It's different names for the same thing depending on culture, language, background. Could have been baptized by two people in the name of the 6 sparks of Ahura Mazda, Godhead for Zoroastrian, monotheistic, or could have used the 6 names that go along with Hinduism: Brahma, Shiva, Vishnu, and their female counterparts. The key component is the faith that both of you believe. For me, when I was baptized by water, which is followed by baptism by fire, it's a spiritual fire, not a physical fire. But when I was baptized, there was a weight lifted off my shoulders, and the space in my heart was, it wasn't emptied. It was emptied of, it was full, but it was empty at the same time. It's like the space had been purified. All the junk and gunk from daily life is washed out, and you're left with this pristine, kind of clean feeling. And what that does is that allows you to get to a partition. The Kundalini energy is partitioned like a hard drive. It's beyond. It's on the other side of a barrier, and this gives you access to the barrier. It gets rid of all of that junk that stands between you and it. And the barrier is like ice cubes. You know, you put an ice cube in your hand, you interact with it, it starts to melt, but it's uncomfortable. And so you switch it from hand to hand like that, melt it a little bit, it's uncomfortable, you switch it back. And as you interact with it, you study it, you come into contact with it, you learn about what it's made of, whether it's hard, whether it has color, whether it has taste, whether it has texture. And as you interact with it, the barrier gets thinner and thinner and thinner. And Kundalini, the consciousness that it's connected to, is on the other side of that barrier. And as the barrier gets thinner and thinner, it's like having a conversation with somebody that's on the other side of a door. At first, you're pounding and banging on it. The Kundalini's on the other side, and that spirit, that energy is on the other side. It's banging, it's screaming, it's yelling at you, but you really can't hear what it's saying. But as the door gets thinner and thinner and thinner, it gets louder and louder and louder. And your whole goal is to prove to that energy that you can hear it and follow directions. You start to interact with it, you start to hear it before it's ever raised. And it's in all of the old great writings. The Mahabharata, Bhagavad Gita, it's in the Bible, it's in the Roman writings, it's in the Greek writings, it's in all those stories. And And a good example of that is the story of Jason and the Argonauts and the Golden Fleece. The Golden Fleece is found halfway up the tree of life, which you are. It is the golden energy of Atman, the spirit, the soul. And that whole story of Jason and the Argonauts and the Golden Fleece is a story about achieving enlightenment. For the people who produced the story of Jason and the Argonauts is their caduceus is ram horns at the bottom, standing in for the flower of life. The focusing unit, if you watched all of the video I produced called Take 5, it has one snake going up the pole, and at the top of the caduceus is an eagle for the wings. So it's another variation on the caduceus, and the story of achieving that golden light, finding that golden light within you, that's what that story is really all about. And you find the same thing in the Egyptian Book of the Dead. All of these different ancient stories, these parables, these metaphors with which they teach, as you're reading these, while you're in this space where all that junk is gone and you have access to the barrier and the barrier is getting thinner, Kundalini starts telling you about what these things really mean. And it doesn't tell you with words. You don't hear words in your head. It tells you with pictures, imagery, memories you can't explain. It's a whole experience. It's not just words in your head. And you have to pay attention to it. And as you go through the process of reading these documents, for me, it was that book, The Word of Now, that I talk about at the end of Take 5. And that was produced by someone other than me back when I was 17. And what's in there is specifically designed for this purpose. But it's not the only one. It's not the only way. And what happens is, as you study these things, the energy teaches you. And it gives you a knowledge and an understanding, and then you have to use that knowledge and understanding in a way that with a ritual that it gives you. It is a mystical way of saying it is that you have to perform a prayer and a ritual that you were never taught. And that's because you weren't taught it from the outside world, you were taught it from the inside world. When you gain this understanding and use it correctly, it proves to the Kundalini energy that you can hear it and that you can follow directions. And this is how you prepare your being for what's coming. Is you have to learn to listen to it, because it becomes the guru. It becomes the teacher. And if you can't hear it, you can't listen to it. That's really bad. Now, I can't tell you the answer to that. I can't share with you what worked for me, because the answer to that is the answer to the test question. This is a test. And if I give you the answer, I really don't do you any justice. So I have to keep that to myself. But, so, now, after I got the answer to the question I was never asked, and performed the ritual I was never asked, a perfect circle between my shoulder blades lit up and tingled for 4 days. And that was the beginning of all of it. It started at the heart, not at the base of the spine. It did start in the spine, though. Um, then the next thing that happens is you are asked to perform a breathing technique where you breathe, you pump your hands out, you breathe it out, you breathe it in, and you have to restrict your mouth so that your diaphragm has to do work. Push. It's like you're trying to reignite a cold coal. You take it out of in a fire pit and just trying to get it to light again. And this is when the magic starts to happen. Now, I only managed to make this work while my intestines were empty. I had, at 36, I had been given, I had an appendix removal, and the hospital gave me a C. diff infection in my intestines. And it would hurt like somebody was dragging a dull knife. It was just this horrible acid would form, and it would just hurt the whole way through. And so I found that I could just fix it all by just washing it out. And so my intestines would be empty because I got rid of it. That's the only time that I could make this work. Your intestines have to be empty. Whether it's from washing it out or from starving yourself until it's all gone, whatever method you use that your intestines have to be empty. And so then using that breathing technique, I would get an energy building up in my body. Every time you do it, there's a little bit of energy left over. And if you do it quick enough, the energy starts to build. The very first time it's the most powerful, it's the most intense. And it has all the bells and whistles. Every frequency, every energy your body can produce, every vibration, the energy seems to be coming from the space around you, above you, through you. One of the times that I did this, I managed to make it outside. It's hard because the energy that's traveling through your legs, you're shaking. It's kind of like you're being electrocuted by something beautiful. And every frequency, every energy is there, but it's overwhelming. You don't know where it's coming from. You don't know what it is. You don't recognize how it's happening. It's just phenomenal. In my head, I compare this to somebody comes to you and they let you drive a Ferrari around. And then they take you back to your house and they dismantle the Ferrari and they put it in your living room and they give you a pen light and a universal tool. And as soon as you put your Ferrari back together, you can have it. It's kind of what it was like. Because in the beginning, it was all of it. And then every time I did it thereafter, some of it was taken away. Like the first 2 or 3 times, you really couldn't tell something had been removed. But after that, every single time something is taken away and it gets a little harder to do. You have to try harder the next time. And I can't tell you how many times I did that. Probably 14, maybe 15 times. With each time something being taken away. And then the last time that I did it, where the energy comes in like that, the next morning I woke up with sparks going up my back. Right up next to my spine. And it was very timid at first. If I moved at all, it would go away, like an animal that is a little skittish. It wasn't real strong. I'd have to lay there perfectly still for it to build up strong enough to where I could feel it. But it would come up to a single chakra in the top of my head. And this is the very beginning before the 1,000-petal lotus is manifested. It's just a single chakra. It's about the size of a 50-cent piece on the top of your head. And when those sparks go up into it, it creates a crescent shape. Because it only goes into the back of the chakra. And you can feel it where it goes in. It creates a little like crescent moon shape on the back of your head where these sparks go up your back and up to the top of your head. And that was fantastic. And then the next morning, the next morning after that one, I woke up with the flower of life, experiencing it. Um, it's it's an energy in the the very very bottom of your stomach, in the groin area. And it's like a flower. It's like a flower. It closes, and when it does, it focuses your chi, and it can open, and it can fold out like that. And this is where things get interesting, because when that flower is focused and brought back to a target in front of your spine, there's an energy that goes up through your body and into your head. And when I first experienced this energy, um, it created a horrible pressure and an instant headache, and I could feel it hit the top of my skull and then kind of drain down sideways like that. And I had to refer to the Kundalini energy and get it to go up my spine and hit from my heart to the bottom of my spine, and from my heart to the top of the crown chakra, to give it energy. And all I had to do was think a line. And the next time I brought that back to the target, it went up and it didn't hurt. And all I felt was a wisp of energy on the top of my head kind of floating around, like you'd imagine a candle would kind of wick like that. And while I was feeling it, I could feel it on the top of that finger too. It was really cool. And then I thought to myself, magnetized. And it became magnetized in that way. It stayed that way. That I've had ever since. And that was in the very beginning. It's the manifestation of the elixir field. The flower of life. It is what manifests as the crown chakra and produces the full. So you get the that thing on top of Buddha's head. It's like a bunch of little circles all over the top of your head, and it has a pattern. And out of it comes a field, and that field produces a spiritual body around you. After that happened, there are three iterations of that field. At first, the way the field moves, when you move your hands and your feet, you can feel them on top of your head because you feel the movement. This is before the circles, the individual chakras come. And you can tell that this energy that's moving through your being is a light, and that you're like a prism. The energy it creates these images, like repeating patterns on the top of your head. When you move your shoulders, you can feel that on top of your head. When you move your head, you can feel that on your shoulders. Then then the next manifestation of it is you can feel your fingers, right? And you feel them move. When you move them, you feel it all over your body, everywhere. Because that light that is pouring through your being creates this multiple manifestations where all of you exist everywhere in all of you. And then the next manifestation is when it becomes fuzzy. And on Buddha's head, you see the little cones. The cones have cones. The little individual cones they create little spikes, and the little spikes have spikes. This is when it becomes fuzzy. And it's a lot like the antenna on moth when they get all fuzzy like that. And it becomes a way of sensing the environment. What's kind of funny is when you smile, like that, they all line up along this part of your head. One of the things that happened is when that energy made it up through the aligned energy center You feel what the arc line, which comes right down in front of the ears. It's a line. I think it should be considered a body meridian, like the belt meridian. It goes this way, you know, and it tingles, and that's pretty cool. But there's so many experiences that were involved in achieving all of this. You have to send the Kundalini up your spine, in the back and in the front. Um, Now, after this occurs, right? Now you do have to do the breathing exercise again. And every time you do it, you raise a different Kundalini energy up your spine. Not just the sparks, different kinds. They feel different. Some of them feel the same. Some of them are masculine. Some of them are feminine. But you have to do that for every level of Kundalini, which was 12 that I could achieve. And then a 13th one comes later that it just comes after you do the work. You can't force that one. Producing 13 levels of Kundalini energy that you manifest. And you use that same breathing energy. And then that's when things get real. That's when things get off the hook. Because you start to manifest with the Kundalini crisis. I began to feel snakes all over my body. They're tactile. I didn't see them, I felt them. They bite each one of my fingers. This is the Ouroboros. It felt like snakes were biting the ends of my fingers. The one on the pointer finger on the right hand was so intense I could feel the ridges on the roof of the snake's mouth as it bit and wiggled. And that's an expression of this energy. And this is my favorite part of the whole experience, really. It was the most intense. It lasted for months. And I just loved it. I imagine for some people it would have been scary as hell, but I just thought it was wonderful. I would have these moments where I was filled with the most absolute, genuine peace and contentment I've ever felt in my life. It was in one of these meditative states. The Kundalini energy, the sparks would go up my back, and I would go into a state where my spine would lock itself into perfect posture. And then I would go into a place, a spiritual place. Most of the time I meditated laying down, so my whole body would be suspended and supported in this arc posture with my back held in an arc, being supported by my shoulder blades and the back of my pelvis. And I'd be like this for 3 hours at a time. And in that, because of the sparks going up my back, I didn't realize the lactic acid or the burn or any pain or any sensation, like nothing hurt. And when I would be in this place, that's the place where I experienced the greatest degree of freedom I've ever felt in my life. Some of the moments in that place were the most beautiful experience I've ever had in my whole life. And the way that I would build the energy, because remember, the Kundalini energy, when it goes up your spine, in the beginning it's kind of timid. And you do that breathing exercise, and you heat up that, at the base of the pelvis, you heat it up. You place your focus, your attention on the coccyx, and you breathe, and you breathe, and you breathe until it gets hot. The heat at one point felt like something was etching itself into my bone. It would get so intense. And the energy would jet up my spine to the top of my head, be sparking and tingling. And when it got strong enough, it would arc my back up and hold me in perfect posture, even though I was laying down. And when I'd come out of this state of being, I would have to like pop my back, like flex it to get all the joints to release. And it would burn so bad. That lactic acid was horrible. And it would hurt. I mean, the pain was kind of intense. It's all the pain I wasn't feeling because of the sparks. I would go downstairs. I craved eggs all the time. And I'd eat like 6 boiled eggs and go right back up and start the whole process again and do it for another 3 hours. 6 hours in one day in this oblivious state of mind, induced by energy. Yeah, just wonderful. And this is that time period where, in between, where I'm learning to raise these different levels, these different types of Kundalini energy up my spine and up the front of me as well. They don't just go up the back, they go up the front. And when they go up the front, they create this little ridges on your nose. It creates a pattern on your whole body. This pattern of double sparks, tick, 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 like up your spine, up the front of your body. And it's all done through breath. You feed the Kundalini with your breath, with breathing. And it's just, you're following directions the whole time. When you raise all 12 levels of energy, when you have made it through this whole process, that's when things get, that's when the snakes are on the fingers, and that's when your perception of everything, you've induced full Kundalini crisis at this point. And this was a long time ago. There are a few things that are a little fuzzy. This is 7 years old, 7 years ago. And I don't talk about it because nobody's gonna. You did what? Yeah. It was incredible. I loved it. I'd do that part of it again in a heartbeat, any day. Any day. It hasn't been that way for a long time. But we go back to Atman, and we go back to the golden energy in the heart, and I call it the warm, soft glow. Because when I finally found it, it filled my body with an energy that softened everything. The energy that I would build up, that felt like it was etching into my bones, all of a sudden I could barely feel it, no matter how hot I got it. This allowed me to build up levels of Kundalini energy I can't even, it's monumental amounts. And that changed everything. And then what happens is absolutely all of it falls apart. It's kind of like you're cocooned in a protective energy. And well, you go through this process. And all of the different parts and pieces of you are separated. They don't work as a whole anymore. You don't have access to any of it, really, anymore. And the way that it worked after that is the classroom began. This is where it starts to teach you about all of the different parts and pieces of yourself that make up who and what you really are on a spiritual level. This is where you get to experience your body meridians. This is where you get to experience the different energy centers in your body. And the way it would work is I would wake up in the morning and there would be an energy happening in my body. And I would take sometimes as much as 3 hours and just lay there and study it. All the different parts and pieces. And this is how I know that you cannot reach enlightenment by the teachings of another person. There is no guru that could teach you this. The only way you can learn this is from the inside, because there are energies that you can produce that nobody could ever even describe it to you. Nobody could tell you how to do this. But you wake up in the morning and you get a chance to study this energy in its purity, produced just by itself. Because every new energy you add to it, they mix. They all mix together. It's a pool of vibration. They all affect each other. If you're going to experience the pure form, this is how it's done. And this is the Kundalini energy. It's teaching me about who and what I really am. All of those energies that I experienced in the very beginning, where each layer was removed every time I performed the ritual, this is teaching me what each one is, so that when I stand in that energy envelope next time, I'll know exactly what's going on, and exactly where the energy's coming from, and exactly what's doing what, and I'll be able to affect change. It won't just be a shotgun blast of just, which actually was really cool. But I would wake up and I would study this energy. And the way it normally worked is it'd take me about 2 weeks to reproduce this energy on my own, based on what I studied. Turn on each body meridian, put energy into each chakra, put all the pieces together to produce that energy purely. And every single time, what would happen when I produced it is in the middle of that aha moment, I did it, where I would be surprised. Like, I did it. Right in the middle of it, I'd get slapped with, I already knew that. Way to ruin the moment kind of thing. But what you have to understand is you can't be surprised when these things happen. You have to be like, oh, all right. There's something about the surprise that inhibits it. So what it was teaching me is when these things happen, don't be shocked. Don't be, when you achieve these things. And it would happen again and again and again and again. Now, along with this, I already knew that, would come the memory of the fact that I already knew that. There's no way I knew that. I didn't know that energy could be produced until 2 weeks earlier. And I wasn't sure I could reproduce it until I did. And yet this memory would come forth like, oh, of course I already knew that. And then, hold on. Then 2 weeks after that, so about 4 weeks in total, the memory would change to, I've been doing that my whole life, and it's easy, and I'm good at it. So in a matter of 4 weeks, I went from not knowing an energy even existed, or that I could produce it, to having the experience and knowing that I've been doing it my whole life, and that it's easy now. There is so much to cover in this way that it still took me 4 years to get through it. To make it through all my body meridians, my 8 extraordinary vessels, and start moving up through the chakras. I mean, I literally unlocked it all doing this. You could consider chakras a type of automatic, like an automatic car. Up until I started using the chakras, everything had to be done manually, like driving a manual car. I had to do it, like, to get the energy going, I had to do it all. And the conscious mind is not designed for that. We can't do it. In order to keep an energy center active, a part of your awareness has to be connected to it. The minute you're not aware of it, the energy starts to dwindle out of it. So to keep it all going, you have to be conscious of it. The conscious mind is not designed to be conscious of everything, to hold on to that conscious awareness of every little detail. And one of the things that took me so long to get through it is I didn't understand that after I learned how to do this, I was supposed to give that knowledge over to the subconscious, which is conscious of everything all the time, and allow it to do it for me. And what happened is after about 3 years of starting every day from scratch, because it stops when you're sleeping, and working my way up through as far as I could go before I passed out from sleep the next day, finding the energy centers, getting them activated, turning them on, aligning them, making sure they're working together right, and going up to the next level. I did this every day, all day for years. And I could have just been turning it over to the subconscious and saying, okay, I know how to do this. Now you know how to do this. You handle it. I'll go to the next level. I was doing mental jumping jacks when I didn't have to. It's one of the things that took so long. But it's the subconscious that has been doing this your whole life. And it's easy for it. And it's good at it. And it's been doing it on a subconscious level, so you weren't conscious of it. It already knows what it's doing. It took me a long time, years, to catch on to this. And I only caught on to it because I reached a point where I couldn't go any farther in 24 hours, in the time that I was awake. I couldn't do it. I'd reached that limit where I just didn't have enough time in any waking session to get any farther than I was. And I thought, what do I do about this? And when I asked the question, I got the answer, well, it's not your job to do this every day. Leave it over to me. Now, what's interesting about that is once you start doing that, the pure forms of energy that you experience when it's by itself, the subconscious starts to leave some of these things on all the time. And so when you have a new experience, it's always mixed. So you start to lose that single energy by itself. So it's probably a good thing that I made it the full 3 years, almost 4, before I reached exasperation. But now, as you get these different energy centers turned on and working right, and you're conscious of them and you're aware of them, there comes a certain point where all of it has to come back together and work together as a whole and as a team. And this is something I've just understood in the last 3 years. The last few months of the last 3 years. I've kind of been doing it the whole time, didn't understand. If you watch that video, Take 5, that I produced, you understand that one hand goes to the pine cone, right? And the other hand goes to a handbag. And you see this on the old Anunnaki statues, Mesopotamian statues. They got the pine cone in one hand, the bag in the other. That bag it's like this is the pine cone, and that bag is everything else. And until you put all of your different parts and pieces into that bag, they don't come together, they don't work together as one. Even though you've turned them over to the subconscious and it's running them, right? You have to get it all into that bag. And the way that that works is there's an energy on this hand that you cover the rest of your body in. And when you do that, you put yourself in the bag. And that universal field, that universal energy that allows all these different layers of chakra bodies, and body meridians, and acupuncture points, it allows them to all come together and work together as one. And so you begin the process of allowing that to happen. And that takes some work and it takes some time. There's no way to force it. And that's when you start to really things start to work on their own. You know? Some of these experiences were just absolutely unbearable. In some of the weirdest ways. My experience, although induced through a Christian theology, was very Egyptian. And I can tell you something. Um, when they talk about the Pharaoh going into the underworld to fight Osiris, that's the enlightenment process. It's not something that happens after his death, when his physical body dies. It happens in his first death, or when he becomes born again. It's a spiritual death. And that's the enlightenment process, because Osiris holds the staff of Osiris, which is the Caduceus. And there's a point along the way in the Pharaoh's travels where he comes across a balancing scale. And on one scale is his heart, and on the other scale is a feather. And that is judgment. And I went through that. And judgment is, it's a healing. It's not what you think. It's not this condemnation thing. It's a healing. And what happens is all of the things that you did in your life out of selfishness and out of greed that hurts the ones you love the most, that you carry in your heart, all those things start to weigh on you, and you start to see flashes of them. And it builds up to a point, and then you go into a grieving session for about 24 hours where you just grieve with everything you had. For me, I grieved my children, and I grieved them as though they had died. And the grieving is so intense, and you go over everything every mistake you ever made in regards to those you hold most dear. And don't freak out, because the end of this is wonderful. It's a wonderful thing. Okay? Parts of it were bad, but the end is wonderful. Because when I wake up the next day, after going through the grieving process, my heart was so much lighter. This huge weight lifted off of me I didn't even know I was carrying. I kind of knew it was there, but you don't know how heavy it is until it's gone. Like, you just don't understand. So my heart was so light. So then the process starts again. It takes a couple of months, different images, different memories, different feelings, different ways that you hurt those you hold most dear. And so the second time that it came around, I knew what was coming. I knew what was going on. And so when I leaned into the grieving process for that 24-hour period, I gave it everything I had. I grieved with all my heart and all my soul. I grieved until I could barely walk. And then the next day, my heart felt lighter, and I was healed just that much more. And then it happened a third time, because in this place, what you have to understand, the balancing scale is, you know how you never know what you have until it's gone. In this place, you know the true value of what you have. And everything you did in selfishness is weighed against it. And that part of it just sucks. It just sucks. But the end result is a forgiveness that lightens your heart to where it's as light as that feather. And it's happened for me one more time. On the third time, I only grieved for 6 hours, and then I ran out of grieving. And then the next day, when I woke up, because even though it was only for 6 hours, I slept. It wiped me out. The next day, my heart was so light that I had a memory of the last time my heart was that light. And I was still in diapers. And I was wearing a little red sweater. I had the diaper on. It was a cloth diaper. And I had these little shoes on. And we were out at a baseball field. And it had just started to rain. And the raindrops were kicking up a little bit of dust. And so, because I was so small, I could smell the ground and the earth and the dust and the wet rain. That was the last time my heart was that light. Something had happened as early as that part in my life that had weighed on my heart. And so the balancing scale was a way of healing me. And the reason for this is because eventually you have to rejoin the cosmic consciousness. And when you are in these energetic states, it broadcasts your state of being into the universal consciousness. And you can't broadcast that kind of pain and sorrow and selfishness and guilt and shame. That cannot be a part of your being when you broadcast into the all of all. When you have all your chakras working, when all this energy is pouring through your being. That's why you have to be in kind of a protective coating. It doesn't just protect you from negative things in your environment. It protects the environment from the negative things in you. Until you have a chance to go through the healing process and heal all of these things, which happens as you go through the different layers of your being, the different chakra bodies, the different body meridians, the different chakras themselves, the different layers of Kundalini. All these different parts and pieces have to be gone through, washed and cleaned. Which is why the recent experience is so strange. I really thought I had got it all. I don't understand why there would be another depth that was unseen. But it was. You know, and that's the whole point of all of this, to return to a place where you are one with your subconscious and you are one with the universe. You have the full gamut of the full experience. You feel the oneness of the universe. I have a few moments left. I'll tell you what that feels like. When you're in that state of being at night and you look up at the stars, you can feel that everything around you is made of consciousness. That across the void there is consciousness and sentience. You can feel it. And you perceive it and it perceives you. You become conscious of it becoming conscious of you, becoming conscious of it becoming you, becoming conscious of it, becoming conscious of you, becoming conscious of it. It's tick, 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 tick. We're conscious of each other. You perceive it over space and time. It's almost instantaneously. During the daytime, everything around you seems to be made of light. It's made of vibrations. You know, in the physical world, when everything vibrates, it gives off infrared light. In the spiritual world, when everything vibrates, it gives off a state of being, a state of consciousness. Plants feel like they're vibrating crystals. And when that energy pours into your being, you pour into the universe and you broadcast your state of being. Everything, all of the information in these emanations is you perceive everything's state of being. And then when that happens, everything perceives your state of being. You have to be pure for that. You have to be clean. You have to be free of all of that icky, or they don't let you in. Because they can't let that be broadcast throughout the all of all. Your pain and your suffering. You'll leave that stain on the universe. They can't allow that. So that's why the healing is necessary. Anyways, so back to the beginning. The most important part of all of it is that you recognize that Kundalini wants to be awakened, and that your job is to listen to it, to dissolve that partition. While you are reading the great works of the world, whichever great work you choose to read, and Kundalini is teaching you. And then after you awaken it, it continues to teach you, because it becomes the guru. I would not trust a guru or anyone else to turn off my energy centers and turn them back on and play with them and then get them set right. Because after you get up and move around, everything goes back to the way it was. Because it starts out, you wake up with this energy happening in your being that you study. And after you get up and move around, it all goes away, and it's up to you to reproduce it. and then you hand it back over to your subconscious. That's how that cycle works. But in order to start that school, you have to do the full awakening. Start with the energies that are taken away, uh, re-raise the energies, re-interact with them, have everything divided, and then put it all back together. That's the full process, is what you have to go through. There's so much more to this story, like so many more details I could share, but I'm running out of time here. I'm at 50 minutes already. So, um, I hope you made it all the way through. Talk to you later.